Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, back again with another video, and today I am sharing 5 more reading journal spread ideas with you all. I asked in my 2022 reading journal setup video if y'all would be interested in seeing more yearly spreads or challenge-based tracking spreads than the ones that I set up in that initial video, and the consensus was very clear. Y'all wanted even more ideas for spreads for your reading journals, so I'm very excited to share a couple more ideas here. Of course, as always, if you're inspired by the style of the spread, this scrapbooky, vintagey feel, that's amazing. But even if your style is completely different, I hope that these spreads will give you an idea of some fun ways that you could track your reading or challenge yourself to read differently or more diversely this year. Opening up my reading journal here, and I haven't updated this spread yet, my 2022 reading tracker, so I'm just going to quickly fill in the boxes to 24 books, which is how many I've read at the time of filming this video. And getting through those initial spreads from the first video, which I'll link in a card and in the description box. If you haven't seen the initial setup, you can see me create these first several spreads and explain how I use them. But now let's get into these 5 new spread ideas. So the first spread I'm working on is a series tracker. I'm not a huge series reader. I used to be much more into reading long series when I was a kid, teenager, even in my early 20s, I was more into series. Things have definitely shifted through my 20s, and now that I'm in my final year of my 20s, I feel like I much prefer to read standalones. I like the lower commitment level of a standalone and not feeling pressure to read several more books just to get to the end of the story. But despite the fact that I'm not as into reading series as I used to, there are definitely still some series that I'm keeping up with, and I felt like it would be helpful to track that somewhere because I am just so forgetful, and it's very easy for me to finish book 3 in a series and then just completely forget that that series exists for several years before I suddenly am reminded, and then I have to go back and start over because I took too long between book 3 and 4, for example. So I felt like tracking it would make it a little bit easier to try to stay on top of the few series that I am actually invested in. To decorate the spread, I'm using a couple scrap pieces of tea-stained paper. If you're interested in seeing how I personally make tea-stained paper, I'll link my tutorial in the card and in the description box down below. I am very low on tea-stained paper right now, and I need to make more, so I will be following that method in the next week or so to make myself a new batch of tea-stained paper. And if you're as into this more vintagey, scrapbooky feel as I am, tea-stained paper is such a great way to add texture and depth and warmth to a spread. I'm a big fan. So for this tracker, I am just listing the number of series along the left side there, just so that I can see how many I'm juggling at once. And then I'm writing the name of the series and the author. And then on the right side, I'm creating as many boxes as there are books in a series. I decided to start from the right, moving to the center, just in case a series maybe right now is planned to be 4 books, but ends up being 6 later. That way I'll still have space to add more boxes moving towards the center if more books are announced in the future. And in each box, I'm writing the number of each installment. I feel like this is especially helpful for some series where maybe there's, book 1 to 5, but then they write a book that actually fits between 2 and 3, so it's 2.5 and whatnot. Things can get a little confusing, so I wanted to write the numbers. And then once I've read a book, I'm alternating between filling it in completely with my black pen or scribbling in, just so that it's a little easier to see the distinction between each box, so I can still count how many I've read. You could obviously fill it in using something more sheer, like the beige Tombow brush pen that I use to fill in my 2022 reading tracker. That would also work for this, but I started filling in with my pen before I thought about that, so this was my solution. Moving on to the next spread idea of this video, which is a reading goals spread. Last year, my reading goals spread was basically just a list of my goals, and this year I decided to shift things a little bit and try to create a reading goal spread based on habit trackers that are common within bullet journaling. So I decided to pick 6 goals that I would be able to track in this format and include them here. And these aren't my only goals for reading in 2022, but these are the ones that I had a specific number of books that I wanted to read in each category. So they fit well into this format of a spread. Some of my other goals, like continuing to read more books with LGBTQIA+ representation, or trying to make sure that more than 50% of the books I read are written by BIPOC authors. Things like that I can't really track in this format. So those are goals that I still have for my reading this year, but they're not on the spread because I couldn't really track them in this way. So the 6 goals that I chose to track on this spread specifically were reading in French, and I hope to read 6 books in French this year. Reading door stoppers, which is a term for large books that could hold a door open because they're so big. And my personal definition for a door stopper is anything over 700 pages. I also want to read at least 6 non-Western classics and 6 Western classics. And then my last 2 goals here, translated works. I'd like to read at least 12. And I'd also like to read at least 12 books written by Canadian authors, since I myself am Canadian. So I'm just using my circle template to create the little circles here, and as I read books that fit in these categories, I can fill them in. So those are my first 2 spread ideas for this video. Flipping to the next spread, and this one is a 2-pager, and it's a book bingo spread. I have made bingo spreads in the past for different things. My favorite was my self-care bingo that I did, I think, years ago at this point, but I've always loved the idea of a bingo spread as a fun way to challenge yourself to do a variety of things and kind of ignite your own competitive spirit to try to get a bingo. So this is yet another way to track your reading goals or to challenge yourself to read in genres that maybe you don't typically dip into, or reading diverse voices or diverse representation. So these bingo squares can be filled with whatever it is that you are trying to challenge yourself to read. Mine have a combination of specific goals for this year, as well as specific types of books that I don't tend to pick up as often. So my squares are livre en français, or book in French, asexual or aromantic author, graphic novel, trans author, non-Western classic, history of a period I know little about, a translated work, dusty TBR, which is a term I came up with for something that's been on my TBR for at least 5 years that I haven't gotten to yet, poetry collection, queer retelling of a fairy tale or a myth, a non-cishet romance, an essay collection, a doorstopper, a neurodivergent author, an anthology that highlights BIPOC authors, a book written pre-500 BC, a short story collection, a book written by a Canadian author, a book recommended to me by a friend, a Western classic, a novella, a book written by a disabled author, an award-winning book from the year I was born, which is 1992, and something for my physical TBR, so a book that I have on my bookshelf that I haven't read yet. Again, I feel like the fun part of this is that your squares can be whatever you want them to be, whatever ways you're trying to challenge yourself, help you get down your TBR in certain areas, or help you to be more experimental, or to help you to be braver, stepping out of your comfort zone when it comes to genre or content of the books you're reading. And I'm super excited to use this spread. Moving on to the 4th spread idea of this video, and this spread is all about reading across the world. So this is something that I've been mulling around as an idea for this year for several months now, actually. I decided that I wanted to do my best to read a book from every country in the world in 2022. Now, there are a lot of countries in the world, so this might not be possible in a single year. I might have to extend this for another year or 2 to get there, but I have been trying to challenge myself to read more outside of North America and outside of American authors specifically, because so much of the English-speaking book world on the internet focuses on American authors. And as a Canadian, I have tried to put in special focus to read more books written by Canadian authors, but I also want to read more just from all over the world and read from regions that aren't talked about nearly as much on BookTube or Book Talk or the internet in general for those of us who are English-speaking from the Western world. So I decided I was going to challenge myself to this, and I've already started making a very detailed list and trying to keep track of recommendations I get for different countries. I'm really excited about this just in general as a challenge, so I definitely wanted to make a spread for this so that I could fill in each country as I went. I thought about drawing the world map myself, but I just knew that I would be trapping myself into this cycle of trying to tell myself it didn't have to be perfect, but then feeling intense pressure to make it perfect and it taking forever and still not being perfect. So I decided to just find a simple map online and print it out and glue it in. Feels like it's easier for everyone, but mostly for me and my mental health. And also my poor hand, that would definitely cramp up if I had to draw a map of the entire world. So I printed this out and glued it in, and I'm gonna fill in each country with that light beige tombow that I have when I read from that particular country, and slowly make my way around the world, hopefully filling in every single country by the end. I was very excited to get to use this vintagey map washi tape that I have. I feel like I don't use it nearly enough, but it was perfect for the spread. And yeah, I'm super excited for this. I think it's going to be a really cool challenge. And speaking of this challenge, if you're watching this video and you're not from the US or Canada or the UK, which are where most of the books I read come from, please leave your recommendations for books from your country or other countries you've read in the comments down below so I can add them to my database, because there are a lot of countries in the world and there are a lot of countries I don't yet have books for. So let me know, give me all your recommendations. Moving on to the final spread idea of this video, which is also kind of a fun challenge for myself for this year, which is reading through history. In the last 2 years, I've read so many books that are new releases or published in the last 5 years or so, and I would love to read more books from different times in history. I feel like when I was young, I had not a huge amount of interest in reading books that didn't take place in the modern day, but as I get older, I have so much more of an appreciation of and interest in history, and I really want to read some old books. So I decided to create this spread, create a timeline, and I'm going to try to read books to fill up this whole timeline from all different points in history. I've started creating a list for this as well, but again, if you have suggestions for older books that I should check out, please leave those down below, because I'm very excited to read books such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Odyssey and the Iliad, Dante's Divine Comedy, and so much more. This is another challenge that I'm super excited for, and another way to diversify the reading I'm doing in yet another way. So that is the final spread idea for this video. I hope these gave you some ideas for your own reading journal, or just for reading inspired spreads in your regular bullet journal. Having a reading journal is so much fun, and I feel like it adds a lot to the experience of reading, which is already a lot of fun for me. So I just love creating reading journal content to share with all of you. Of course, if you have requests for specific reading journal videos you want to see, or suggestions for other spreads I could do, please leave those down below. I would love to try to fulfill your requests. And with that, I'm going to finish up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave some sort of book-related emoji down below if you made it all the way to the end, so I know you're a real one. And before I go, I'm going to take a quick second to thank my patrons for their support. Extra special thanks to our newest patrons: Deirdre, Jasmine, Tracy, Mandy, Leone, Jennifer, Melanie, Kiara, Felicia, and Christine. Welcome all of you to the squad. We are so excited to have you. If you at home want to join the squad, feel free. There's a link in the card and in the description box down below. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends. If you're a book lover, don't forget to check out my last video where I read and reviewed all of the Goodreads Choice Award winners for 2021, told you my thoughts, whether I felt they deserved to win, and which books I would have chosen to win instead if not. I think it was a fun video, so check that out if you haven't seen it already.